Welcome, everybody, to the July 2025 BodyTalk Business Café, the gathering where we bring together BodyTalk practitioners and talk about what's going on in our businesses, because getting certified is only half of the project. So today I am super thrilled. We will be shortly introducing our two presenters who are going to, today's going to be more interactive, discussion based. They'll be talking amongst themselves, and you'll have an opportunity also to participate. And if you are listening in afterwards, then hopefully your question will be answered too. And we will, I'm going to just say right now, for those who didn't already hear, we will be leaving a little time at the end to turn off the recording, but because this is an interactive discussion, we'll mostly be recording. But if you have something that you'd really just like to keep in the small group, then we'll save a little space for that. Okay, so we do generally start with announcements. And at the moment we are low on announcements. There is one, and actually I'm going to pull up, really should have had this handy, but you know, you can be, I don't like to be too perfect because it makes you guys feel bad about yourselves. So, you know.
Right. Thank you for that.
I like to leave room for improvement. Fundamentals integration just started today, so that one's underway. Kerry D'Ambrosio is going to be coming to town in September for his I believe it's live, but it might be online, for the foundations class. We have some information coming on the newsletter about that. I'm sorry, it's the energy medicine foundations class. This is BodyTalk adjacent. Kerry D'Ambrosio is BodyTalk instructor, but this is not a BodyTalk class. But it pairs well under the other modalities bubble. And I wanted to let you guys know who are within driving distance of Seattle that we are doing another trade and potluck day. Those are very popular and have been really just, I mean, it's a great experience. It's great body talk. It's camaraderie. It's, you know, we're potlucking, we're shooting the breeze. We're talking about our body talk lives. Anyway, that's going to be Saturday, September 6th from 3 till about 6. So it's not too long of a time commitment. It's enough time to get together, have a snack, do some body talk, have a visit, be on with your Saturday. So if you're in the area and can make it, Saturday, September 6th for Trade and Potluck Day. Okay, and that is all that I have on my agenda. And I'm just going to check and make sure. Often Vanessa has things, but I don't think she could make it today. She's in the middle of moving house. So in fact, we'll be meeting at her new house for the Trade and Potluck Day. Okay, so I'm going to go switch to here and I'm going to turn it over. Our presenters today are Diana Gard and Medoc Perry, two body talk practitioners who have been around for a long time. They have established practices. They've seen all kinds of things, and they got to talking one day about some kind of hairy things that they were trying to figure out, and they were like, hey, we've got some stuff that we could potentially share. So I'm going to just step out of the way, give the floor to Medoc and Diana, and you guys can take it away, and you are welcome to ask people to introduce themselves, whatever. It's your game now. Off you go.
Go. Hi, Medoc. Yeah, I agree with Medoc. It'd be nice to hear from the three of you who are here in terms of who you are and where you come from.
And potentially just how long you've been in practice, kind of where you're at, just so that we can pitch a conversation also to, ideally for people starting out, but also if you have a lot of experience, some of this is going to be things you already know. So.
Right.
Sure. Hi, I'm Irma. I am from the Netherlands, and I've been I started with Body Talk in 2005, and I've been practicing ever since. So yeah, I went full time somewhere around 2011, and still running a full-time practice. So yeah, I've had my share of experience with clients up and down. Yeah. So I'm curious for your conversation. Thanks.
Cool.
My name is Rose Friesen, and I'm from Salmon Arm, British Columbia, just north of you guys in Washington. So, Yeah, I was introduced to BodyTalk in 2014, and I started studying in 2020, and I certified in 2022. And I've been practicing part-time since, and my vision is to go full-time when that opens up.
Awesome.
Right on. Thanks. And, oh, you need to unmute.
Yeah,
There.
I'm mute. Hi, I'm Annemieke. I'm also from the Netherlands. And I started BodyTalk in 2011 and became CBP in 2013. And since then, I've part-time practice, and since like maybe 1 year or so, full-time.
Oh, wonderful.
And since I decided to go full-time, it's running. It's flowing like really, really good. So
Yay.
I'm really happy. Yeah, what about clients who go beyond your borders? Well, I have some, but not too many. So yeah.
Sounds like
But
we all
very
have-
interesting, really, also to have like separation of private and practice, private and business. It's because I have I practice at home,
Oh, yeah.
and it's always mingling up. So yeah, I'm trying hard to separate it. That's not always successful. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay.
Hey guys, I'm gonna pop in real quick too, just so people who know who is sitting here, and I've been in practice since 2008. Continuously. Sometimes it's been very small, sometimes it's been overwhelmingly large. And I know somebody said, oh, maybe you know, but we never know. You know, there's always more to learn about being savvy with helping work through some of the conflicts that can happen with clients. So, and last but not least, Sandy, we are just introducing ourselves because this is going to be more of an interactive presentation today. If you'd like to do that, how long you've been in practice, etc.
I actually first started in 2005.
Yeah.
I guess it's more on and off than full time, but still going.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I suppose I should say how long I've been in practice. I'm in Seattle. I've been in practice since 2006. And on and off, sometimes full-time, sometimes not, more full-time now that I'm old. And that's, clients come and go. It's an interesting process, but basically now I do it a lot.
Thank you. And I'm Medoc Perry. I was living in Seattle for quite a few years, for about 12 years, and I'm originally from New Zealand, which is where I started my BodyTalk journey, way back in similar time to many of you, about 2007. So I was part-time and kind of working, doing BodyTalk on the side of a full-time job. And then a couple of 3 years ago, I stepped out into more full-time, with the practice being more of my full-time income. I do BodyTalk and I also do family constellations. But I also have a history of working in like non-profits and working on crisis lines and things like that. So I have a little bit of a perspective on that side of things as well, and did a psychology degree. So maybe I'll add some of that to the discussion today. So I'm really glad to be here with you all.
Cool.
So me and Diana had a bit of a chat the other day and just kind of framed a little bit of what we wanted to talk about. And yes, this did come out of a discussion we had actually about a particular client. And then we thought, well, gosh, this is a good thing to bring up in our organization. Clients that sometimes can be quite difficult or are pushing boundaries. Yeah, we started it. We thought, had a little chat about things we wanted to cover. And of course, you're always welcome to ask questions, but it might be that you want to wait till the end because we may have something on our list to cover. And then at the end, we can open it up for more of a discussion. Yeah. So Diana, did you want to kick it off in a certain area?
Well, what was most profound, I think, about us chatting was that it's a really good idea, especially if you've got a client you need to talk about, to chat.
Yeah.
Really, we can use each other, and it's amazing the different resources each of us have to offer just from our own brains and our experiences, um, to really help kind of get some clarity on things you might be struggling with, that a client triggered, one way or another. So that's probably our best advice, is talk about it with each other. And we have each other. And the more, I think both Medoc and I had the experience of going, oh gosh, I'm so glad I got to know Medoc better just from that conversation.
And
And it matters.
And it's nice to hear someone else's perspective on a situation, someone who, does deal with clients regularly. So the thing that I was, became really clear to me, and that I'm very grateful for, is thinking about boundaries ahead of time. So I've been in practice for quite a while now, also coming from like a crisis line background or a psychology background. I've thought about some of these scenarios, and I like that right now my boundaries around clients is pretty strong. I mostly know what I like and don't like and what I prefer. And so when I have a discussion with a client, I'm already framing some of those conversations right from the start. But every now and again, something sticky comes up, and then it's great to have someone else to chat with about it, especially if we need another perspective. And in this case, it was a client who had seen both of us. So in that way, it was really nice to then be able to have a conversation. Yeah, so maybe we could talk about things that have come to our attention, Diana, over the time of our practice, things that are like important to have boundaries around, things that we've found particularly important.
Yeah. I think that, first of all, why boundaries matter at all is in my thinking. It saves a lot of time to start with, just to have, some set things that are true. It makes a giant difference. It also saves your energy. When you're working with people and you're outside of what you want to be true, it really drains. That whole experience of working with people should be building you and gaining you energy. And that happens if you are solid and grounded. And otherwise, yeah, it just drains right out of you. When you're working at a time when you didn't want to be working, when you aren't being paid, things like that, those things drain you. So, and then I think that both Medoc and I talked about when we started out versus now. And we had, didn't have perfect boundaries set early on. And we got to find out, what worked and what didn't. And I think that's always happening. So we're continuing to be flexible with our boundaries because some things work, some things don't. As we change, those things work and don't. So that's my thinking on that. Then what are the processes for setting boundaries, having boundaries?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say a little bit about like even just me as a client, when I go to see a practitioner, it's really helpful for me to know what their boundaries are, how they like to be paid, what they like to be paid, when they like to work, where do they work from. It's actually, if I'm seeing a client or seeing a practitioner and they're not really clear on their payment amount, and they kind of like, I don't actually like when people have like a pay what you want system, because to me that it causes me a lot of work. So I find as a client, it's really helpful when there's a very clear boundary. Like I do phone sessions or I do video sessions, because then I can decide, does that work for me? So I think it's both sides where the boundaries are helpful. But I think at the start of my practice, I was very focused on like, oh, I need some, I want clients. So I wanted to be as flexible as possible. And then over time, I realized, yeah, actually, it doesn't work for me to work, on the weekends necessarily. I need to have days off. And, I like to work online. Now that I've got a space to work from in Arizona, I'm seeing clients in person again, but for a long time, I was just an online practice. So in that way, we can be really upfront with clients and tell them what works for us. Also payment, do we take cash? Do we take credit cards? Those kinds of things. So for me, I'm pretty clear on how I take payments. So I don't take Zelle or things like that. So sometimes I have to say, well, do you have another payment that works for you? Because for me, it's just easier to have certain payment methods. So sometimes we really do just have to think about also what works for us as practitioners. So for me, I find a consent form feels really good. I like to have a consent form, and I know some people like to do intake forms. I'm not so big on having a really long intake because I want to talk with someone, and I don't keep a lot of personal information about people. And that for me is because I don't necessarily have a secure way of storing it. But those are again decisions that each person needs to make on whether that feels right or not. What I do usually do is see that first session as a kind of meet and greet. Sometimes people do call me for a consultation to start with, but often that first session to me is like, hey, let's see if we can work together. Are you the kind of client who likes my style? Are you a client that feels like we can work together? And especially for me with constellations, because constellations is quite an involved process. I want to make sure that someone's in a space where they can process that kind of a session. So that's important to me. The other thing that's been important with time is like what the relationship to the person is. So I'm happy seeing some friends and some family, but other people, they're too close for me to be particularly objective with, and especially like with a constellation. So for me, there's times that I'm going to want to refer people out. And for me, that's a little bit of a boundary issue, just because I think it works better for me to be really honest with people who aren't too close with me. And there's some parts of their system that I'm not going to be able to see if they've kind of got an energetic boundary. So those are a couple of things that I've been thinking about. Anyway, Diane, maybe you have a little bit to add to that, and then I can continue it.
Yeah, just right away into the location kind of thing. Like Anamika, you talked about working at home. And that was for me early on. I used to have clients come to my home, and I stopped because I could not make that work. I couldn't separate. I also wanted to have, when you're I work from quite a, I'm not going to say psychic, I'm going to say intuitive. I work from an intuitive place, and I feel like I draw clients by my mindset. And so having a space that is specifically for clients seems to have worked for me in terms of bringing clients in. So having that space be in my house, it didn't work. That's who I am. And so again, this is about sort of how you set boundaries, or don't. But for me, having a place I rent where people come made all the difference in terms of just creating a kind of a boundary. So that's, I don't remember when that started, probably pretty early. A couple of years into my practice, I'd say.
And I had an office on Whidbey Island, and I also liked that. I like the fact that anyone could come there. There were other practitioners in the building, and it also has a professional feel about it. Right now, I'm working from a room in my home, which means that I just see certain clients. So for me, I need to have a conversation with them first before I might see them in person. Otherwise, everyone else is online. And occasionally, very occasionally, I'll do a home visit to someone's house. It's pretty rare, but occasionally I'll do it if someone's got mobility issues or there's some really strong reason why we might do that, or for a constellation.
And I do that very specifically because I work on animals a lot. And it's actually in Washington State. I don't know if this is still true, but it was true when I started. If you can't have an animal come to you.
Oh, really? Wow.
You have to be a vet. So it's also for animals, especially pets, they work best when they're in their home environment. They're more open. So I do go to my clients' homes a lot, and that works great. Again, it's still easier to set boundaries that way for me. I'm interested in knowing how you do that when you're doing mainly online.
How I set boundaries or how I see animals?
Well, no, how you do online work. You still got to create a space, right?
Yep. So obviously, the space then becomes Zoom. And I was just thinking that when you talked about the animals working best in their space, I often find that for quite a few clients, it's really nice to be able to meet in an online space because they're in their environment. So there's certain things that I'm going to see about their energy system that I'm going to see more effectively because they're at home.
Wow.
When someone comes to me, they have to drive generally.
Yeah.
And so that creates a certain framework, right? So they have to be okay when they leave to be able to get in their car and drive. So there might be certain parts of the work that I can't do if we're going really deep into some kind of process. So online, they could half fall asleep and it wouldn't matter. At the end of the session, they can just lie back and fall asleep if that's needed. So in that way, it's really nice. And actually, I will work with animals too online sometimes with people. And so in their home, there's the animal and it's in their environment. So I find online work works really well. It's just whether the client feels like they can accept it as a possibility, as a real, what am I trying to say? Can they accept that this is a session that's going to be effective for them? And I find a lot of clients are amazed by how well online sessions work. So, I have clients in other countries even, or can do constellations online by representing. And so, yeah, it's really nice and very, and it can feel very safe. And for me, it's easy too. So,
and isn't that interesting? I mean, I think, when you study body talk, you study quantum theory, and the distance is meaningless, right? But I think that I when I started, it feels like, well, we were pretty well into the computer world, but it feels like, especially since COVID, people have gotten a lot more comfortable with interacting through something like this, through Zoom, or what have you, and understanding that it doesn't, this screen here doesn't stop the energy at all.
Yep, or the intuition. Yep.
Right.
And I try to point out to clients too that it's their body making all of the changes. Like, it becomes really clear when we work online that I'm not forcing anything to change in someone's system. I'm just observing it and bringing the information about the shift that's needed so that their body can make that change. And it's very clear that that's what's happening when we work online.
Neat.
And saying that, I also wanted to point out that, most of us on this call right now are women. There's an extra layer to being a female practitioner, about who and where you see people, just in terms of safety. Whether, there's been a couple of times when I've been with a client and I've thought, yeah, this is an interesting dynamic here. And, like, especially if I hear about some of their background or, and then I sort of think, okay, I listen to that spidey sense, and again, check to make sure that boundaries are, really strong. Would see certain clients in person only when there's other people in the building. I wouldn't see someone late at night. And of course, that's also a cause for, like, if someone really feels unsafe, to not see someone again. So there's been a couple of clients that I was quite happy that they didn't come see me again, because actually, in fact, there was one situation that I don't know why, I Googled a particular client. This was, and again, just my intuition, someone booked and I Googled their name, which I do occasionally, and found out some information about a particular client. And I was like, oh, good to know. And that informed some of how I moved forward, because there was actually information out online about them. So yeah, I mean, we should listen to our intuition as practitioners sometimes too, right? Because we can sometimes push that aside because we focus on the client's well-being instead of our own, sometimes more importantly, right? So sometimes we actually really need to make sure that we're also front and center.
Right. And that's probably it. I mean, yeah, we can talk about. I think there are some great stories of sticky clients, and I feel like I've had my share.
Yeah.
And some of them are like, we talked earlier, Medoc, about a client I had that I'd been seeing them for years. And the first sessions were really profound and amazing. And then over time, they weren't getting better. It was sort of like habitual stuff.
Right.
And is that okay? In my case, no. I felt really weird. I mean, it's great to get paid, but
is it satisfying to you as a practitioner to be dealing with the same issue over and over again?
Right. And so that was somebody I had to fire. I mean, we didn't use the word fire, I think, Medoc. We talked about different ways to.
I don't think we use the word fire, but that is a word that people use.
Yeah, I mean, you have to come up with language that works and do it in with kindness. Come up with referrals, whatever works for you. But it is important to know that it's okay to stop working with somebody.
Yeah, and it's probably a good time to say, some practitioners are licensed, so everyone in every country will have a different situation about what you can and can't do. And some people who are BodyTalk practitioners are licensed therapists, or they are licensed massage therapists. And so for them, they'll have a certain set of rules that their licensure covers. For me, I actually chose not to get licensed as a mental health therapist, because actually it constrained me more in terms of my BodyTalk practice and doing constellation. So for some of us who aren't licensed, then we have more freedom to say end with a client or without referring on, or, there's certain rules for some licensures. Like, I think mental health therapists have to make sure that a client is then passed over to someone else.
Oh.
So anyway, it's just good to know that we have a little more freedom to. The other thing I think I like to do with clients is I like the client to come to their own conclusion. So sometimes having a conversation that sort of steers the issues, so that they also become aware that, hey, yeah, maybe I'm not growing as much, or maybe it is time to try something else. Or sometimes I've had conversations when someone's very cognitive and they have a hard time feeling somatically into their body. Like, sometimes we'll try to steer it towards, can you feel the changes? And I run through a set of procedures to get people to look at a before measure of how they feel, and then afterwards to try to get clients to feel, oh yeah, there has been a shift during the session. Because I think that can be a big one if the client's not feeling the changes. And we talked about this, didn't we, Diana, that sometimes we see the changes quite strongly, or people around the client see the changes, but the client's like, I don't know, I'm not sure if much is happening. And you're like, wow, actually, I think a lot has happened.
Yeah.
So helping them to see that.
And that's, another thing to consider as a practitioner of BodyTalk in particular is what is your job?
Yeah.
And it isn't necessarily, to make somebody get better, right? It's to bring them wherever they need to get brought. And that can look really subtle. And can be sometimes for you as a practitioner somewhat unsatisfying. And so you sort of have to decide, again, this is a boundary thing. It's like where you draw your line. Is it okay that you worked with somebody who hated what you did? And of course it is, because that's what happened. And it's just, I think
and on top of that, is it okay to take their money or to have taken someone else's money for a session that someone didn't like? I'd say yes, because we still do the session in good faith. And usually we're actually still really good at what we do.
And you don't know what it meant to them. You don't know down the line what it's going to mean to them. I was talking, we talked about a client I had that was, this again speaks also to having a conversation beforehand so you can get languaging right and stuff like that. Because I was working with a client and we hadn't talked at all. She just hired me. We started the session, and right away, my work tends to be a little bit woo-woo. And so there were all these people standing around my client and who, were otherworldly. And I referred to them as extraterrestrials. And that was not okay with her. She said, I am only taking information from God. So whoever it is you're talking to, this is not right and wrong. It's so wrong.
Right.
And so, I mean, yeah, I needed to know that before I started using my words. So that's something for everybody to be conscious of, is, prepping for sessions. I actually have started including on my list of things you can sign up for a 30-minute consultation call that's free, just so that, so I don't do that again. But also, so I'm saying all of that, and I continued with the session and talked to her in her language, shifted it. And I think that was good. And I think the session was meaningful, and it may be meaningful for her somewhere down the line. Who knows? I don't think she'll ever call me again, but that doesn't mean that was not a good session. At least in terms of whatever we define that as. And I defined it as having an experience. And really, I say it on my website. If you've taken the trouble to make the phone call to do your work, you've done it. That's the thing. So we just go through the motions as practitioners, doing whatever it is we do that's fun and interesting. But really, we've interacted with another human being in a way that was intended toward their healing. Whatever that is.
And we use words that we can best find that match what we're observing or seeing shift and change. And sometimes it's hard to find the words to describe what we're seeing. And then the tricky, then also sharing it in words that works for them. So sometimes I'll ask things too, like, hey, so how do you feel about this? Or what's your belief around God, or something more than, just to kind of see if I can find a way to frame whatever's about to come out of my mouth next.
Right.
Because I too have had a similar situation. At one point, sometimes I would talk about getting information from helpers, and I also had someone who was really not happy about that, because they had this feeling that sometimes these helpers could not be helpful, could come from a different, not so positive place. And so that for her was an issue. So I try to be careful about what, but then it comes down to sometimes finding clients that just use a similar language. I've got to say, I feel more comfortable, and clients find me more and more that are more aligned to my way of seeing the world. So where energy is important, observation is important. I do believe that there's helpers and spirits and ancestors that can sometimes come in to assist. I often find clients who can feel the shifts in their body and notice the shifts quite quickly in their life. More and more that's the case now. And I think that's because something shifted in me, but because I also talk to certain people, and word of mouth just brings me people, you know, who through other people who've worked with me that then have sort of framed in a good way for my work. I remember right at the beginning when I started in Seattle, this guy came to see me. He'd been brought by his wife because he had, you know, I think it was back problems or something. But he was very uncomfortable with the way I was working and the session and body talk. And I think at that time, I didn't have a good way to explain what I was doing. I think with time, and certainly I know doing some of the courses with Tracy has really helped me explain things in a good way. And over time, with doing more and more body talk, I have language that I can use that explains what's happening for people who don't know, you know, energy work. But at that time, I had trouble explaining, and he got off my table so quickly. And yeah, I never heard from him again. And there was another guy who came, had knee problems, and he also, I think he was uncomfortable with well, I can't put words in his mouth, but he also left very quickly. But I think he was very used to a medical model, and sometimes these clients do come to us who are very used to a medical model. And he still got 50% less knee pain the next day. He was like, I have no idea what you did, because he was having trouble really grasping what I was doing. He said, I have no idea, but my knee's 50% better today. So like, great. And he also never came back to me, you know. And so I just had to be comfortable with the fact that he returned to do his stuff with the medical system, but that I had provided the piece that I needed to provide and not be attached to that. So sometimes that's the case. We just have to be okay to let go, right?
Yeah. And I think it does speak to how we as practitioners, we draw to us the clients who need to see us. And sometimes that looks really weird. You know what I mean? It isn't necessarily always the people that speak your language. And sometimes we draw to us because we are, as practitioners, we are also clients. You know what I mean? So we draw to us who's going to help us grow as well.
Such a good point. And I think it's such a good point because then we can trust. I mean, I have this agreement set up with the universe, and I did that at some point. I think someone mentioned it once upon a time that it was a good idea to do, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to do the same thing. So I basically said, hey, universe, I will take whatever client comes to me as long as you only send people that are the right clients for me. And so that's been my agreement, and it's worked really well for me. Often, you know, yeah, I think every client's felt like it's been a good match on some level, and that level might also be to teach me a lesson about what I need to change about my practice, or
right.
Because we know if the same kind of clients are coming and keep coming who are challenging, we probably need to look at something inside us, right? Because we believe in this sort of holographic universe that's a reflection. So then maybe we need to go get a session from someone like Robin or Diana or someone else on the call, you know, who works with businesses, or, you know, get a constellation with me so that we can look at some of those issues of what's going on in us.
Which speaks to the final topic I think that we wanted to talk about, which is self-care. That's an important part of setting your boundaries and figuring out how to deal with difficult clients. That, you know, what do you do?
Yeah.
When your session was awful.
Which was also partly where this whole thing came out of, was when me and Dana were talking, like, what do we do with this particular client? You know, what's like, sort of talking with someone else about what's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of it too, right, is really knowing within ourselves what feels good to us and what doesn't feel good to us, and where we're willing to wiggle and where we're not willing to wiggle. You know, sometimes for a client who I think is going to be a really great fit, I'll work you know, I'll work a little later at night or a bit earlier in the day. You know, sometimes I like to have payment up front from a new client, but once someone's been seeing me for a while, I'm okay with it. They pay me after the session. You know, that's no problem because I know they're going to pay at some point. But I'm not going to let someone rack up like 5 sessions that they owe me. You know, so, you know, and I've heard of practitioners who do that, and then they're in a pickle because how do they get that payment, you know? So luckily with cash clients, like, you know, I don't have to bill insurance or anything. Of course, it's much easier. We can just get payment at the time. But the other thing is when we know what our specific boundaries are, we can know when we need to refer out. You know, like if we really don't see people in person and someone really wants to see someone in person, it's pretty clear we're going to refer them out.
Yeah.
If someone's a male and we're a practitioner who's really uncomfortable with male clients, which it could happen, you know, then it's okay to refer out, especially if you get any funny. I trust my gut instinct for sure. So sort of if in doubt, I'm going to think, oh, actually, I know another practitioner who's going to be a really good fit for you. And for me, sometimes that'll be clients who are really in their head. You know, someone who's really, I'm pretty good trying to get people into their bodies, but every now and again, there will be clients who are just so, you know, that actually someone else might be a better fit than my very intuitive style. So,
right. And that's, I think that we can, you know, one of the main client that brought Medoc and I together is somebody who not only, at least for me,
good point.
wasn't paying immediately. I did get paid eventually, but was like, just give me a call any time of day or night, sending me texts anytime, day or night. And really kind of trying to butter me up by saying what a good practitioner I was. And I mean, I just immediately had some very uncomfortable, intuitive gut, this isn't okay feelings. And then I caught wind of the fact that the same client was going to other BodyTalk practitioners. So if there's this other thing about communicating with each other, not just getting help, you know, with particular issues, but also letting each other know if there's somebody who might be sort of stalking us. You know, that's potentially true. And I think it worked out a little better for you, Medoc. But
yeah, well, it did work out better because the person actually said to me, I've seen these practitioners and so I already had a heads up that there'd been some prior work that had been done. You know, I was just thinking about one of the other things, just leaving that client aside for right now, is clients who are like leading as clients, they're kind of trying to lead the work that I'm doing. Because I love the BodyTalk model. I love the fact that we look at what's a priority, what's ready to shift for the client right now, what's right. And that may not be what the client thinks is right. So I try to work to what they bring to me as best I can. But there's going to be times that there's something else completely. So sometimes when clients come in and they're very fixed on this is what I need to get done. And, you know, at some points I have places where I can refer out. So like I know someone who works with like entities and darker energies, things like that. So if someone comes to me and says, this is what I had another practitioner reach out to me and ask, do you work with entities and dark energies? Could you do some work with this client? And I said, well, I would work with that if it came up naturally in a session. But for me, that's not something I go searching for because that doesn't work with my way I see things. But I know other practitioners who do. So let me refer you to them. So, you know, in that case, that felt really good for them. But sometimes, you know, sometimes we have clients who will tell, you know, they'll spend 40 minutes of the session trying to tell a story, the same story, like you said, about clients who haven't changed. You know, that may not be appropriate. They might be looking for talk therapy, in which case, you know, I might refer them to someone who does talk more than energy work, because I want to spend the time best served shifting the energy in their body, shifting the consciousness. So those are a couple of things that spring to mind. But having a good referral network, and even referral network amongst our BodyTalk practitioners, people who are better working with certain things than others. It's really good to have those people, and outside as well. Other things that spring to mind are mental health issues, very strong addictions, things like that, where it might step outside my realm. I don't know, like sexuality is not a big thing I work with either. So, there might be times that just referring on makes sense because of the issues that the client's coming, or the what the client's wanting to work with. I'm not saying it's an issue necessarily.
And it's, again, I mean, I think it's really important. Why we love BodyTalk is that if somebody comes in with an issue that we can't necessarily address directly, it might be that working on their big toe handles it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The priorities are amazing.
It's a good point. And if a client wants to stay with me, of course, generally I'll work with them. Like I say, I generally accept that most people who come to me is my client, and there's going to be some times when like I'm not going to do a constellation with someone who's delusional and not able to process the information that we're receiving about their family. As good as it might be, the constellation, they may not be in a place where they can accept that information as useful for them at that time. So that just might not be the appropriate modality for them. Or the other thing I want to say too, that's a big issue for a lot of natural practitioners, for alternative practitioners and helping professions, is money. And often we have clients who come, maybe they want to receive free sessions or very heavily discounted sessions. So I've definitely had people who've asked me, could you please drop your fee significantly for me? And in my practice, I have found that sometimes that works. Sometimes giving someone a discounted session and they really appreciate it and it's still of value to them can be helpful. But for some clients, it's actually diminished the amount of, it seems like it diminishes the amount of results that they have because they're maybe not valuing my work. And this was a lesson to me a long time ago. I worked with someone I knew personally because I really felt they could do with this help. So I offered sessions to them because I was like, I would really like to support you. And what I found is that really nothing changed with their story after I did a few sessions with them. And what I realized is they had this very entrenched kind of outlook on life, and it was working for them. Like being the victim or having all these difficulties was actually working for them because they were getting free stuff. And so I quickly learned, that's not the best thing to do. And so I have a pretty strong policy about not discounting sessions. Every now and again, I'll do it for things like people who live in another country where the exchange rate's really hard. And that does happen. But for the most part, I'm pretty clear about what feels good to me to receive in exchange for my work.
And don't you offer group sessions?
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, that was actually my, thank you for mentioning that because I was thinking about that. That was my solution to feeling like I could offer people discounted sessions, is that I could offer group sessions that are very reasonable. Like at the moment it's $25 per session US for people to come. And that was my way of saying, I can't do a one-to-one session for that rate, but you come to my group session. And I have had quite a few clients who come to that regularly as a way of getting support where financially, the individual sessions are harder for them. So yeah. It's been really good. And I do a free session, 4 times a year, a group session, because for me, that just feels good. Again, it's a way to introduce myself and for, to donate work to people who maybe couldn't get it otherwise. So yeah, but it does make a good point. We talked a little bit about this, and maybe you could speak to this, Diana, is when clients are gifted sessions or there's gift certificates, things like that. We talked a little bit about how, that may not match the expectation.
Yeah. And I think I've had a number of clients that, like I had a person come in, she had an amazing session. She loved it so much. And it was her husband had died suddenly. And so she paid for her kids
Right.
to come see me, and, you know, without their having made that decision. And one of the kids had an incredible session with me, the other did not. And I think that's just an example of what that's like when people are not, it's not their commitment. It can be a less valuable session, or it can be great, you know. So it's not that that's a bad thing. It's that it's tricky.
Yeah. And that maybe a consult call would be great so they can feel into us and make that decision. I often ask clients to do that. Like if they're thinking of sending someone, I'd say, well, get them to give me a call and then get them to book their own session, you know, and you can pay for it. I can send you the invoice, no problem. But at least that way the person's still choosing the session themselves.
Yeah, I like that, because that's exactly right.
Because it's nice. It is nice to receive a gift, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about maybe self-care. What do we do when a session goes really badly, or heaven forbid, a client passes away? I mean, that has happened to me in the last year or two.
I work with animals. I have lots of dead clients. Yeah. What do you do? I mean, I think, again, we do need each other. And it might be nice to set up groups where we just gather and discuss.
Client situations, and that's part of what we talked about, wasn't it, when we initially discussed this? Like that, it's nice to have someone to consult with.
Yeah.
Or a group to consult with that's very private.
Right, because sometimes there is some trauma for us involved in that.
And it's good to talk about it, obviously, just to point this out, with someone who it's confidential. Like, you're not going to tell your mate who's got the biggest mouth, you know, in town, who's going to go tell everyone in your small community. I work in a very small community now.
Right.
You know, it is not appropriate to discuss things here, obviously. It's like, I'm going to take that to someone else in a different community, and who's going to be professionally confidential.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is getting our own self-care, like having something that we can do for ourselves if we get off a really tough call. There is occasionally going to be tough clients that we're going to work with where I've had a couple of, it doesn't happen very often because BodyTalk's so amazing at just working with what comes up. But I have had a couple of clients who we obviously touched on some deep trauma, or maybe they don't look at that side of themselves very often. And by the end of the call, they were very emotional. You know, sometimes it's emotional because it's flowing and it's normal, and sometimes it just really is very strong for them. And so then it's making sure that I also have a time to sit with that a little bit and just feel into it for myself. You know, that the client last year, I had a realization at some point with a client that, oh my gosh, and this was a client I didn't know really why they were coming to me. And at one point I had a realization that they were going to pass away, like and how I held that myself. Luckily, you know, for me, I have a belief that life goes on. For me, it's not an ending necessarily. It's a, you know, it's a recreation. And so that was how I held it, that they were moving into a recreation phase. But you know, that can be tough when we've worked with someone for several years and all of a sudden they're not there anymore. And we know so many personal details about them.
Yeah. You know. And that's, I have, as we're talking, I mean, I joked about the animals, but I actually have a couple of different clients that didn't want to die. They were crying about it and they died. And I don't know what I think I've got some like little dark spots in me that I stored because of that. I mean, that's hard. That's really hard.
Yeah, and being able to take that somewhere and have some support with that grief of yours.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing is also like, we're going to get clients who are also going to mirror to us some of our own things, you know, like if we've got a particular flavor of trauma in our life, sometimes those are the very clients who end up on our table. And sometimes it's helpful, right? Because we know the language, we know the experience, but sometimes it brings stuff up in us if it hasn't been resolved. So then where do we take that, you know, so that maybe we can then shift the clients on our table, or that we can be more present. So it's good to keep an eye on ourselves when we're doing sessions, what's coming up for us. And are we blending in? Like I get this with constellations sometimes. When people stand in to represent someone's family member, I can see sometimes, oh, this part's the actual client's family and this part's the representative's own work. You know, and we have to recognize that in ourselves sometimes. Like, where is my own work getting blended with the client? And some of it's quite natural and normal, and sometimes it's, you know, doesn't serve the client.
That's a really good point. I think there's probably a ton of that.
Yeah.
You know, it's just human beings coming into contact with other human beings. It's the nature of it.
And also, like, how much work? I mean, I like to go see practitioners who've done their work. I know they get their own work done. I know they've done heaps of constellations if I'm seeing a constellation practitioner, because I want to know that they are pretty objective and clear to be able to do the work with me. And so I feel the same. I want to offer the same thing to my clients. I want to make sure I'm getting regular sessions, and that I didn't step into full-time practice till I really felt like I could be very present and objective. I think that's the New Zealander in me. We don't really say we can do something until we can like do it expert level. We're kind of like on the lowdown. So yeah, well, I don't mean to sound big-headed about it, but yeah.
Oh, it's the opposite of the American approach.
Yeah, like, and that's right. I mean, I got a certificate on the weekend. I'm opening up my practice. Like, I can work with all kinds of trauma. It's like, oh wow. Like, I really hope you've got people to work with. So I'm just sort of looking at our list if there's other things that we haven't covered. You know, I am curious, actually, Diana. Do you have extra things you do? Where I know you work with animals more than me. Every now and again, I'll work with an animal, because they're basically usually with the client and the animal together.
Yeah.
But what's some extra levels of things you do for animal clients in terms of boundaries or safety or those kinds of things? Is there additional levels to that?
I don't think so. I feel like it's the same boundaries. It's a typically easier because I'm in their home. That actually it creates its own boundary. I do think that I do have to make sure I inform my clients, the human ones, that when I work on their animals, their animals are going to talk to me about them.
Right.
And so I'm also, I mean, it's all the time. Your pets care about you. Just everybody know that, because they will say to me, yeah, okay, so let's work on my liver. But once we're done with that, you got to know Nancy has some issues and she needs to stop eating bananas. You know, I mean, this is the kind of stuff the animals tell me.
That's so caring.
And that's, I mean, so that's not, I work mainly on a psychic level with animals, you know, body talk. I do body talk with them, but typically if I'm working on people's animals, I'm just listening to what they're saying. So, you know, but that is important, because I think people would be shocked if I didn't inform them right away that we're also working. As a matter of fact, if I go to somebody's house and they've got 3 cats and 2 dogs and 3 humans, all of them are going to be worked on if I walk into that space. And so that's a thing I have to really set up and make sure everybody knows.
Right. And that there's permission in that respect.
Which is, I mean, of course, I think it's wonderful. I love that kind of work, because it's how they feel, their families.
And then you're working on the whole system,
right?
Which is the way we could probably be working with everyone's family or everyone's surroundings, really. But And it
Right.
does sometimes come up in human sessions that way.
Right. And it does, I mean, and that's a thing. And I mean, there's a thing on our body talk chart that is that, right?
Mhm.
Family matrix, right?
Yeah, complex matrices. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also
So-
permissions, I guess, like permission's a priority. Yeah,
right.
like this cat hasn't given permission, so
That's right.
so we need
Sorry.
to talk to them a little more.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, and I think that's a good point of limitations. Like I often find too, talking of boundaries, is if someone's on my table and they want me to work on their boyfriend, it's like,
Oh.
well, actually, I don't have permission to work in their energy field necessarily. I can work on how you feel about them and your
Right.
relationship with them and the complex matrix side of it. But I'm not going to go in and start working on him without his permission.
That's a very good point. So that is a different thing from the animal thing. Because that's, I would definitely not work on somebody's kids or whatever while they were there, my client.
Yeah.
You know, that would be a line I'd draw.
Right. Whereas the animals, it's different. Animals are so blended. I mean, we could argue we are as well, but yeah. And I think one other thing just occurred to me, which is boundaries. You know, boundaries are different on an individual session and a group call. So when I set up group sessions, you know, there's also a piece, just the logistical piece, right, online of like not interrupting and being full of other people. And if things get too loud, we might have to just drop you off the call, or, you know, please don't be texting and eating and driving conversations going on or something. You know?
Good God.
So like, I watched this one call, it was a group call, someone else doing a constellation. I do family constellations online too, but we were watching this group, me and some other people, and this woman had put her hand up to receive a constellation, but she was driving in the car and she got picked. And they were like, oh, you've been picked. And it's really clear she's driving the car. And they said, are you driving right now? And she said, yes, I am. She said, oh, I guess I shouldn't receive the session. It's like, yeah, no, good idea. Like, fortunately, we'll save you for another time. But I just thought it was funny. She put up her hand. It's like,
imagine that.
So there's just some practical things, right, that clients don't think about, that we, you know, if we have clear procedures and protocols around them, it just makes sense. So,
so guys, I want to make sure we have time for folks to ask.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think that about wraps up most of what we had written down.
Yep. I feel like we covered it.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk. If anybody has anything they want to talk about.
Thank you guys so much. And let's let's put up our virtual hand so we're not talking on each other. Because I'm sure we have some questions and some experiences from our own practices.
And I just want to point out, if you have specific actual clients that you wanted to mention, maybe save that. We can do this part of the discussion, then close off, and then have a little discussion if we wanted to about specifics, just so that things stay private.
I'd save a few minutes at the end to turn off the recording.
Only if people have that, but it just keeps a little safer that way.
So I will start with a question. I'll just kick it off because I've been curious about this. So I've been getting really clear. You guys really named a couple of things. Clients are not ideal, but habitual clients. I have a whole pile of these people that just come to me month after month. I've been trying to be like, so what are we doing? And they're like, no, I just want to see what my body says. And part of me is like, well, that's body talk. I guess I'll just see what you, but it is, honestly, it's boring as anything. It's frustrating. I feel like things don't change. I feel like I've been saying this for some of these people. Right. I'm saying the same things for years. The body has been saying the same things for years. And after a while, I'm like, all right, I have a relationship with these people. They're like kind of my bread and butter. And I feel like it's getting clear. I'm going to have to probably start having some conversations and maybe inviting some of these people to leave.
Right.
And I really don't know how to do it. And maybe it's a whole big topic, but you mentioned something about like, I hate the phrase fire a client. That's
right.
Like, what? Like that just sounds, but maybe it's time to part ways. And like, what kind of language do you guys use not with the creepy people? With the creepy people, you just got to draw a hard boundary and say, you know, I'm sorry, this doesn't work out for us, or not even, I'm sorry. See how I said it automatically.
Right.
I'm working out. I'm not going to reschedule you. I do have some thoughts of someone that might be a better fit, you know, that's awkward, but it's better than having these people in your office. It's like breaking up with a bad boyfriend.
Yeah.
Like, all right, you just got to suck it up. But the ones that you like, but it's like kind of has run its course. Do you have thoughts on how to talk about that?
And that's, I think we talked about that a little bit, Medoc. I did not do well with my one habitual client. I mean, I did it, but I kind of lied. I sort of said I wasn't going to be available for a chunk of time. And maybe, you know, after that, maybe we could talk, but, you know, don't call me, I'll call you, sort of it was kind of like that.
Excuse me.
And that worked out great.
I know therapists do this all the time because they talk about graduating a client when a client has like plateaued.
Graduating, yeah.
And you know, sometimes that can be because they have a particular like treatment plan, or they have a kind of idea about things they're working through, and when they get to the sort of end of that set of things, is there a new focus, or is it time to say, actually, we've kind of reached the end? And so that could be part of when you start, now that you know that that's a thing, you start that off with clients. Like once we reach a point where we've plateaued, maybe I refer you to someone else who can look at a different set of flavors in your system. Because that's where I see other practitioners have these specific focuses or ways of seeing the client that may be different to you seeing them. So, you know, Diana might see a completely different set of particular vibrations in their system that could shift, you know, it's a possibility. But, you know, knowing you, Robert, I think you're the kind of practitioner who might become someone who does more like, and not to use the official body talk term of breakthrough, but kind of breakthrough sessions where if people are at a point where they need to shift, you kind of get them through that transition point and then send them to someone else to do the ongoing, you know, more.
That is what I do.
You're
Totally right. And I get bored.
And I find often that's who comes to me too, is people who are in transition, who like need a few sessions, and then often, you know,
a little harder to fill your practice with, but way more fun.
Yeah.
Thank
Tricky.
you. Thanks. Sandy, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
All right. Yeah, there it is. I'm having a hard time with my phone not working. The first question was about doing distance sessions, but not online. I just wondered if you do that, because I have found that sometimes I'll write afterwards the notes and then people don't even respond. And I wonder if they're, I don't know, it's like, well, they didn't understand what I said, or how to write those notes so people really catch what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I do a fair number of those, and I find them to be very powerful, at least in my world. But yeah, trying to get, I mean, first of all, not having an expectation that somebody's going to respond is probably a good idea. Right. You know, but also I have been, when I send my notes, I will have questions. Like I will say, I expect that you might have some weird dreams, for instance. Depends on what we've done. But there should be some shift kind of responses. And so you can say, you know, I expect you to have this and this and this. Let me know whether this and this and this happens.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think that it is nice to feel like you're maintaining some kind of relationship, even though you haven't, you know, interacted per se.
Yeah, and then I just, from my perspective on it, is I don't do a lot of like distance sessions that way, but every now and again a client will request like a recorded session, and I tend to record the voice. So at some point, John Valtheim did say that there's something actually helpful about the vibration of our voice as we're sharing the information that seems to connect with someone's system. And so I will often record it on my phone, or I'll record it. And so I think that for me feels really good, so they can hear it in my own voice, because I find it really time consuming to sit and type a big thing out too. So for me, it's just not practical. The other thing is that I had a practitioner once give me very strict guidance. She said, and she works with animals, and she said, when you finish working with someone, just walk away and don't look back. Don't expect anything. The session is with them. It's none of your business anymore what happens after that. And of course, as humans, we want to get involved. I love to get involved. I love hearing results. But I have really considered that. So every now and again, if someone's very new, I'll reach out to them and ask, how's it going? I do have a automatic email that goes to people from my scheduler, but every now and again I'll reach out. But mostly I just let them reach out to me if they want, and I put that at the end of every session.
Interesting.
It's up to them if they want to book again. It's not my business, really. It's my business, but it's not really my business.
Yeah.
Right.
But when you would either speak out the session or write it, would you write down like section 1 and all the different aspects, or do you summarize what came up?
I tell it like a story. So if you ever came to one of my group sessions, I do it very much like that. I just tell a story about what's coming up and what I'm seeing and what I'm observing and what I might be seeing in their system shifting. So I'm still following the protocol, but I'm turning it into more of a story that they can follow. Yeah.
Okay, that probably would.
A lot of us do that, because I think
work
body
better
talk
for
language
people.
isn't really helpful unless you know body talk. So yeah, I like it when it's turned into a story for me. But I think Rose, does that answer your question, Sandy?
Yes, I just wanted to make another comment about something you talked about, people who passed away afterwards. I just had a session with, I think it was like one of the last sessions where after that I didn't have many clients anymore. But at one point I held his hand and I felt that it was like he was talking about his grandmother and some emotional thing, and this energy just went up into my arm, and I had to go to a chiropractor for many sessions after that.
Wow.
So I don't know if not having clients after that very many is just a self-protection, or if, I don't know. It's been tough to get back into having people.
Well, that will be a really great thing to take to any one of the practitioners, here or that connected with the Pacific Northwest Body Talk Association, because we probably could look at if something did come up at that time that could be resolved in your system, because it sounds like you felt some kind of energy come to you, so that it's worth looking at.
Hadn't thought of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Rose, your turn.
Make sure I'm not muted. So there was different parts that kind of, made me think a little extra, especially that part where the client talks about seeing other practitioners. Something that bubbled up for me when you were talking about it was asking the client what worked for them or what didn't work for them with those other practitioners, or what happened that they were choosing me. And I think so far, most of my clients are actually in person. So I'm thinking that's possibly a good factor, a positive factor. But at the same time, appreciate your insight on looking into what might be behind it.
Behind seeing people in person, you mean?
Or behind seeing multiple practitioners. But I also but I also see a positive in seeing multiple practitioners myself.
Yeah,
For sure.
Because everyone brings a different view, perspective, dynamic into shifting something that's stuck.
And I think that's actually really healthy for us as practitioners to really accept that we can't do everything for one client, that actually it's really healthy for someone to be able to see other practitioners at different times. This particular case, though, they had actually left one practitioner and come to the next. So it was like, there was a oh, okay, so you've seen these other people, you know, like why.
Yeah.
And so I did have a discussion with the client. I don't want to give the details on this
No,
necessarily,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
because it's personal, maybe, you know, we could later.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I was just thinking a little bit with what Sandy said too, is that, you know, there's another layer actually to these boundaries that we need to think about. And that is actually our energetic boundaries as practitioners. And when we're picking things up from the client and when we put them down, and do we have a practice at the end of a session to clear our energy field, to clear our room, to clear our head? You know, I've created something, and, you know, it could be, I think we might have had a session about this, didn't we, Robin? I think there's a recording about this, but I think that's a really important part. And if we think we've picked something up and we can't clear it, let's go to someone else and ask them to clear it.
Yeah, and see, and that's something that I've had I work out of a naturopath clinic, and so I'm using their
Right.
booking system, and so most everything is just working out of there. So I've had, like, I do have discovery calls, and I had a conversation with a possible client, and that was one of the questions was, did I smudge the room after each session? And I'm like, no, because I don't have that belief that I need to. And so I don't. But I also know that, you know, that's something that I can be more aware of too. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about was being a practitioner that comes from and is still from a conservative background, religion, that a lot of, like, I feel like my conservative background is shifting and changing. Like, the community or the circle that I'm in is becoming more open to other possibilities. But I also feel like at large, there's still a lot of contraction around that. And how do I, as a practitioner, hold out that option for those beliefs and to help others that are seeking support? And I know that I speak from a place of knowing God. I use the word God, but I also know that others have different terminologies, different beliefs. And so how do I then speak in that language, or even offer that? Is there any insight?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I think that you can have a conversation with somebody and say, you know, what word do you want to use for God?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if that person says it's the universal mother, then you can say, you know, if whatever comes up for you, you know, the universal mother is involved, right? So
Yes.
it's not that hard especially if you are open and caring about your client, to use their language, whatever it is. And if their language is, don't talk to me about God, then don't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing that has come up has been, like, you know how on the protocol chart we have other systems or other modalities?
Yes.
And I've been taken there at times where I've felt like I've needed to connect with God in their session, or bring that into the session, or prayer.
Right.
And I had a client that didn't pray in that respect, but then intuitively I was like, so what would that be for you? And so then it was meditation. And I said, okay, like, let's go into a meditation space and connect in with that. And it's fascinating how some of those things work, and then that client hasn't rebooked.
Right.
And so then it's like, okay, what what happened? Was that positive? Did that shift what she needed shifting? There's no interaction with that made me feel uncomfortable. And so how do you understand that? Because there could be trauma around that, right? And am I understanding the cues for that's coming from my client?
Well, I think that we've been talking about that very thing. I think that you find the trust that whatever you said and did was exactly right.
Yeah.
No
Thank you.
matter what the response of the client seems to be.
Yeah.
Because that's true. That I can say very confidently that that's true. Whatever you did was exactly right.
Okay.
And I think trusting that as practitioners, we're on a learning journey to find out, what works for us best. Like, how do we practice? I know I'm much more specific about how I describe my sessions now than I would have been, 10, 15 years ago. So I share, and I'm going to actually do this again. I'm going to update my website to be even more specific about how I work so I can attract people who have a similar outlook, so that there's less that I have to explain to start with, because then I'm going to get people who are my sort of flavor of client, who like to work intuitively, who like to feel the somatic changes in their body, who really trust that this observation creates change. But I can also trust that, wow, I've got Rose that I can refer someone to who, if they've got a strong traditional Christian belief, like actually she'd be a great person to refer this client to. And that's not that I wouldn't work with them, because it might work really well to work with them, but I know that we've all got a different flavor. So I also trust that as well.
Yeah.
And I love that we can language things in different ways. I usually don't use the word like something like entity. I would say like a foreign energy in someone's body, or I might use spirit or something greater than us for God. So
yes,
describe things in different ways that work for our clients. Yeah. Does that answer enough for you, Rose?
I think so. Thank you.
Irma, you're up.
Right. So I wanted to respond a little bit also to Rose's question, if I may. I often have clients that come for one session and then I don't see them anymore, or they come for 1 or 2 sessions and then I don't see them anymore. And I too have heard along the way that, okay, so you do the session and you don't look back. But my personal experience in that was, so I did a session for a client. She came once, never came again. Well, not never. 2 years later, she calls me again and she wanted to make another appointment. She said that one session changed my life and set so many things in motion, and now I'm ready for the next step.
Wow.
Yeah, so that really taught me that, okay, I really got to let go of what I'm doing, because I have no idea, right? I mean, I know what I'm doing, but I have no idea what the result is for this person, because I'm not observing that. I'm just observing the little session, whatever the outcome is. And so that's given me just much more peace that, okay, if they don't come back, well, I did my little thing in their life and, it'll be okay.
Oh, thank you for that. It's so
wow.
true, because sometimes we think someone not coming back is a bad thing. And I've had that same experience too, where someone's come back and be like, oh my God, that just was life-changing. Or I'll feel that it's life-changing while they're on the table. But I do have a way now that I talk to people about the benefit of ongoing sessions, because we are just working with layers. So now I do try to have that conversation in the session. Of course, they're still free to choose to come back or not, but I do point that out, because sometimes clients don't realize that we're not just dealing with everything in one session, that actually this is a preparatory layer and we're going to get deeper and deeper over time. So that's a good conversation to have. Dinah, do you have a...
No, that's, I love that story, and I've had the same thing. So it's, you just have to trust.
And I think also trust that we, like you said, Dana, I loved what you just said about trusting that we did exactly the right thing that was needed at that very right moment, because we can overthink these sessions and conversations. Yeah. And it's really good to have trust in our own abilities and timing, and that unfolded just the way it was meant to. Yeah. Which maybe that's a good place to call it, to wrap it up, if no one has another question.
We're going to stop the recording. We'll do that. We have just a few more minutes for folks that are here live if there's something you want to discuss, but we are almost at time. So just for recording's sake, thank you both so much, Diana and Medoc. Really just full of so much wisdom. And thank you everyone that was able to make it live. It's especially a couple of you, well, many of you are international. So
yeah, wow.
So much for that. And,
well, and I do just want to point out too that some of the work we do with BodyTalk, particularly with matrix sessions, or like I do constellations, these things can be really helpful to look at the dynamics between us and clients. If we are having problems, if anyone's having ongoing situations, you know, reach out to another practitioner, get a session specifically on that, because it can, you know, this work is amazing for that kind of thing. So we don't have to work alone.
all right, I'm going to stop the recording, and those of you who are here, let's just stick around a few more minutes. Thank you, recording folk. And bye-bye.